1999, 6-year-old Noah Greaves vanished during a school hike. His body was never found. Search dogs circled the same grove for days. No footprints, no struggle, just a half-eaten sandwich resting on a mossy log. Last week, a storm split open an ancient pine deep in that forest, and wedged in the hollow 30 feet up was Noah's red backpack, dry, intact, and zipped shut. Inside, a photo no one took. Noah, standing in the same woods, smiling at the camera, with his eyes sewn shut. He wasn't alone in that picture, and he never was. You're already 2 minutes late. He only comes for those who know. They told her it was just runoff from the storm, a natural crack in a tree split by lightning. But when Claire first saw it, standing knee-deep in wet needles, her breath didn't fog because of the cold. It fogged because the air had changed. The tree had opened. She hadn't meant to go that far into the forest. The park ranger tape had long since disintegrated. The trail was overgrown, slick with rot and apology, but something tugged at her. A sound, maybe wind, maybe breath, had drawn her off the path, and there, half buried in the roots of an old elm, she saw red dot, not fresh red, weather-faded, sun-leached, soaked through red, the kind of red fabric remembers, a backpack, child-sized, torn at the seams. Still zipped, she knelt. Her knees sank into the sponge of the earth. The zipper moved to easily inside. A hymn torn from a book, curled like it had been chewed at the edges. A burnt photo, not fully gone, just enough to erase one face. You could still see a child's arm reaching toward someone, but the hand it held was missing. And at the bottom, stuck like an afterthought, a child's shoe, left foot, laces knotted tight, like someone meant to come back. Claire sat back on her heels. The trees whispered like mouths too tired to scream. The forest hadn't moved, but something had. The bark of the elm cracked again, softly this time, like the way bones crack when they remember their break. A hairline fissure spidered across the trunk, and beneath the opening something gleamed, not light, something harder, metal. She reached for it before she thought not to. A drawer, it slid out from the base of the tree. Dry despite the rain, perfectly fit as if built into the wood. It shouldn't have existed. Not here, not in a living tree. Not with a rusted institutional label half-laked off arch, GGA -1999. Her fingers trembled. She had seen that tag before, on a redacted ledger found in a police archive. The one they told her never to cite inside the drawer. More photos. All time-stamped, all dated weeks, even months, before the disappearance of Daniel M., age 9. Missing since July 2000, but these weren't crime scene photos. They were personal. A birthday, a classroom, a hallway lined with children's drawings, and in every photo, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for, was the same red backpack. Sometimes slung over a hook, sometimes lying in a corner. In one image, the one she couldn't look away from, it hung in front of a mirror. The mirror reflected the wrong. Year not 2000, 2003. Claire's throat tightened. Her fingers twitched toward her recorder, but the static was already screaming, low, corrupted, swallowing its own breath. A whine started, deep inside her skull, like someone dragging a nail through wet glass. Then a breath on her neck. Not wind, not animal. Something human-shaped, but memory wrong. She turned. The tree had shifted. Not moved, shifted, like a door that used to be flush with the wall, but now had hinges. A hollow she hadn't seen before gaped open, and there, inside, curled like sleep or retreat, was something wrapped in cloth. Old, church-stitched cloth. A child's blanket. She stepped forward. The ground gave a little. Her boot hit something hard. Another drawer she pulled. This one was full of documents, school reports, medical slips, a ledger marked transition cases. The names were partially smudged, but not all. The first line read, M_Daniel removed for recurrent status. Returned the ink blurred under her breath. She wiped it. The damp, and there, underneath, someone had scratched in a different pen. They brought him back before he left. Something was wrong with the sound of the forest now. It had gone too quiet, not empty, choked, like it was holding something in its mouth. She flipped the page. Another name. A girl this time. Daniel. In the corner, eyes wide, and behind him, on the chalkboard, someone had written in childish scrawl, I am still here. Same handwriting appeared again, in different ink, on a hymn she hadn't seen before. Tucked beneath the blanket, a verse struck out with trembling lines. Over it, someone had written, the forest never forgot. You just stopped asking. Claire backed away. Her breath fogged again. She didn't notice the handprint at first. Not until she turned, and the mirror hanging off a low branch. How had she not seen it? Shivered with a pulse that wasn't hers. The handprint spread outward. From the inside, she ran, but the trees didn't let her leave the same way. The path curved wrong. The forest bent like it was breathing. And when she broke through the line of trees, it wasn't her car she saw. It was the orphanage. The one torn down in 2006. Whole standing, lights on. She staggered back, looked again. It was gone, in her hand, clenched without knowing, the burnt photo. Only now, the face was back, Daniel, alive, smiling, holding hands with someone herself, and in the lower corner, a printed time stamp. April 9th, 1997, 4:13 p.m., 3 years before she ever met him. 2, before she ever worked the case. She dropped the photos. It landed face up. The red backpack was there too. The forest didn't forget. After the storm, something came loose. The bark split. The lie tore open, and inside the tree, a memory that wasn't ready to be seen. It had her handwriting on it. The building didn't smell like a ruin it should have. The walls were split, the paint blistered, the doors swollen with humidity and regret. But beneath the mildew and rat dust and broken stone, there was the smell of something clean, something soft, something recent. Claire didn't speak as she crossed the threshold. Her recorder clicked on. The floorboards creaked once and then didn't again, as if they'd agreed to hold their breath with her. This was supposed to be the staff kitchen, marked off limits in the floor plans. The same ones the county had denied existed until she'd pulled the carbon duplicate from the Part University archive. There was no record of this room, no maintenance, logs, no photos, not even a mention in Sister Adeline's interviews. Still, someone had used it. The dust was disturbed only in the shape of a child's height. The stool by the counter was slightly angled, not knocked, not dragged, just ... turned, as if whoever had been there was waiting to be noticed. Her light caught something on the table. She moved closer. A sandwich, soft bread, white, no mold, no crust, cut diagonal, still damp at the edge, like it had been. Made this morning, but she knew it hadn't. There was no refrigerator, No cooling system, no wrappers, no scent of plastic. Just that unmistakable smell, peanut butter and strawberry jam, like breath held in a room that no longer had lungs. She hovered her hand over it. The warmth was real, too real. Her throat dried. The other side of the room was darker, but the window, if it could be called that, had no glass, only bars. A forgotten detail on the blueprint. Like this room had never been meant to see outside. Claire's eyes adjusted slowly. On the far wall, something reflected that shouldn't have. A mirror, too tall for children, but angled downward, as if once forced to reflect only their mouths and chins. She stepped toward it, and her breath caught. Not because of her face, but because behind her, in the glass, someone else sat at the table. A child. Face turned, not moving. A hand resting beside the sandwich. Their mouth open, waiting. She turned. The stool was empty. The sandwich untouched. She looked back at the mirror. The child was gone, in its place. A year, etched into the frame. Scratched, but deliberate. 2004. Claire's skin bristled. The orphanage had shut down in 1999. She'd seen the demolition contract. She lifted the recorder to her lips. Entry log. No mold. No decay. Bread is fresh. Time signature unknown. The drawer under the sink jerked. Open by itself. She flinched. Inside, a burnt photo. Familiar now. The same boy from the red backpack. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Another child stood beside him. The face was smudged. Not burned, not faded, smudged. Like it had been rubbed out by a wet thumb. The same thumbprint reappeared on the counter. She stared. It hadn't been there before. A perfect print. Small left hand. Pressed so freshly into the grime that the surrounding dust hadn't dared to settle. She moved backward, slowly, one breath at a time, until her shoulder tapped the cabinet behind her. Something shifted. Not in the air, in the wall. A hairline crack splintered along the paint. It curved, stopped, then continued, like something under the surface was tracing its way free. She pressed her ear to the wall, half wishing for silence, fully dreading what she heard instead. Breathing, not hers, not echo, not wind, just one. Slow inhale, and then a sound like chewing. She ripped herself away. The sandwich was still there, unbitten. She stepped closer. A second child's shoe, right foot, sat under the table, untied. It hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. She knelt. Her hand hovered over the laces. Something wet dripped onto her wrist. Not water, strawberry. Jam, but the sandwich was dry. The crack in the wall widened. Claire stumbled to the cabinet, yanked open the door. Inside, files, dozens, each stamped with the institutional seal, faded blue, etched with cross and flame dot. The top file bore no name, only Room 5B, Nutritional Observations. She flipped through. Subject refuses to acknowledge missing sibling. Sandwich replaced daily, left untouched. Time of spoilage, none observed. Room shows signs of temporal misalignment. Recommend silence protocol. No further inquiry, she clutched. The folder tighter. Beneath it, another document, redacted by hand in thick marker. But one sentence was left visible. The sandwich outlived the child. Her mouth dried to cotton. A noise behind her. The stool moved. Not violently, just scooted an inch. She turned. A second plate sat beside the first. Empty. She hadn't brought it. She hadn't seen it. Her breath fogged the mirror. There was no one standing in front of it. Her breath, no body, just the fog. She backed toward the exit. But her hand touched only wall. The door cracked moments ago was gone. In its place, more cabinetry, perfectly flush, seamless. A room that had reswallowed itself. The sandwich hadn't moved, but the chair was pulled closer now. The photo in her hand, the one she'd retrieved from the drawer, was wet at the corner, jam and behind the boys. Head, barely visible unless you tilted it under the right light, was another face. Not a child, a man in a cassock, eyes blank, fingers hovering above the boy's shoulder. Not touching, just about to. Claire forced herself to look away. She pulled out her backup evidence pouch, slid the sandwich inside. It still radiated faint warmth. Her hands trembled. She fled the way she came, not through the door, which no longer existed, but through the broken window. Her coat tore on the bars. Something whispered as she passed. It sounded like, "Don't forget the other half." She didn't stop running until she hit the car. The sandwich was still warm. 3 days later, the lab called. She didn't give a name, just listened. The voice on the other end read from the report, dry, disbelieving. Composition confirms. Bread baked less than 72 hours ago. No microbial presence. DNA traces matched Daniel M.B. She hung up, checked her desk. The sandwich was back untouched. Same bite mark. Same angle, and next to it, the other shoe, soft bread. No mold. They never moved it. It never aged, and the scent lingered. Like breath waiting to speak, Claire marked the tree again. Third time, the same red wax crayon she'd used an hour ago dragged across the bark with a familiar tremble. Her breath misted. The trail beneath her boots was soft, too soft, like bread left out in the damp too long. The mark she'd made earlier was still there, not faded, not washed by rain, identical in angle, pressure, height, like she had never moved, or like the forest had returned her, piece by piece, to where she began. The grove shouldn't exist. Not according to the topography scans, not on the satellite renders, not even in the old parish hand maps. But it did. It curved inward. Pathways bent like spines protecting something central. A clearing that wouldn't stay cleared. Every hiker who'd reported it used the same phrase. The deeper you go, the less your compass believes you. Claire checked her GPS. The number blinked. 999 meters. Distance traveled. Same as 20 minutes ago. Same as yesterday. Same as the hiker who went missing last month. She turned, looked behind her. Nothing but trees. But when she turned again, there it was. The burnt photo stuck to the base of an elm. She hadn't dropped it. She hadn't brought it. It was the same one. Daniel blurred slightly, half his smile missing. This time, though another detail had surfaced, a hymn sheet tucked into the boy's pocket, crumpled. Part of a line was visible. Where time forgets, the choir returns. Claire tucked the photo into her jacket. Every object here was an echo. Left not just to be found, but to be relived. The trees swayed without wind. She kept walking. Her boots traced careful arcs through mud that glistened unnaturally. At one bend, the trail narrowed. She stopped, looked down. A child's shoe, right foot. Laces dragged and knotted around twigs. The same shoe from the table, but here it was newer, untouched by mildew or ash. It faced the clearing. She stepped around it. Ahead, a sliver of light through a cracked door, except it wasn't a door. It was tree trunks, split by shadow, giving way to something, built, a structure, no larger than a tool shed, but wrong too. Quiet, too central. The grove formed its shape around it, like ribs protecting a second heart. She moved toward it. Every step made the GPS blink harder. The display trembled. 999 meters, 0.999 meters. 999 meters. Looped out the door to the structure opened before she reached it. Inside a chair, a drawer, a ledger on a tilted desk, warped from old water but not ruined. A mirror hanging crooked on the back wall. A child's breath had fogged the glass. The shape still fresh. But there was no child here. She entered. The door clicked shut. Behind her, she touched the drawer. It slid open without resistance. Inside him fragments, all the same verse, rewritten over and over, some in pen, some in crayon. One burned into the paper. We walked in spirals, but they said it was straight. We walked in spirals, but they said it was safe. We walked in spirals, but we never came back. Claire's mouth tightened. Beneath the pages, a hand-drawn map. She held it to the light. It didn't resemble the satellite layout. Instead, it looked like a child's sketch, but with impossible detail. Every bend, every misstep, the exact trail she'd taken. In the center, a spiral, and written in the middle, "Keep them turning." She turned toward the mirror. Her reflection didn't match. She'd tied her hair back. But the woman in the mirror had it down, smudged across her neck, something in ash, a fingerprint. Small dot. She reached up. Nothing on her skin. The mirror fogged again, but not from her breath. Something behind her was breathing. She didn't turn. Instead, she stepped closer. Her reflection remained mismatched. Then the mirror cracked, a hairline fracture. It moved, inching like a worm. She backed away, behind the mirror. The wall had warped, slightly bowed outward, as if something had pushed from the inside. A faint knock. She turned to leave. But the door no longer existed, just a new wall, newly dry, as if painted over minutes ago. The GPS still blinked in her pocket. She pulled it out. Still, 999 meters, the same number. Flashed again, this time carved faintly into the chair leg. She traced it with her finger. Beneath it, initials, to faint, almost erased. She squinted. DM. The same initials on the missing hiker's tag from 2 years ago. The one they never confirmed was a child. She paced the room, her breathing uneven now. She pressed her palms to the wall where the door had been cold, but the opposite wall. Warm. She moved toward it. A sound faint from behind the mirror, a soft thud, then a whisper, not in words, in rhythm. Like something rocking. She gripped the edges and yanked. The mirror tore off the wall, revealing something deeper. A second room, shallow as a closet, lightless. Inside, a spiral drawn in chalk. A child's shirt, folded carefully. A photo nailed. To the far side, only one corner burnt. It was the same photo again, but this time her face was in it. Claire, younger, smiling. Her badge barely visible. And beside her, the same boy, Daniel, arm looped through hers. The time stamp, July 2000. But she hadn't met him until August. Hadn't even joined the agency until June. She stepped backward. Something under her foot cracked. The floorboard had shifted. Beneath it, just visible now. A handprint, tiny, smudged, facing upward. She didn't want to open it. She did. The floor gave. Not down, in like peeling paper off memory. Inside. Another GPS unit. Same brand. Same blinking. and under it, a strip of cloth from a cassock. A ledger page was stuffed into the crevice. Do not allow them to walk alone. The longer they walk, the tighter it turns. If they reach the middle, the time unravels. And so do they. Claire dropped it. Something scraped behind her. She turned. The spiral on the wall had changed. It now pointed toward her. The chalk moved, almost imperceptibly, as if finishing itself in real time. The mirror began to fog again. She stepped back into the trail, and suddenly she was outside. Same forest, same tree, same red wax mark. Her GPS read 999 meters. The shoe was back. The hymn folded differently this time. She checked the map again, but now, in the spiral's center, her own name had appeared, and beneath it a number scratched in, 999 paths, curved where they shouldn't. Maps contradicted survivors. Children drew spirals where trails were. Time didn't pass. Here it coiled. The more they searched, the deeper. It pulled, and now the grove knew her name. The folder wasn't labeled. Just a marbled black cover, edges softened by years of fingernails and dust. Claire found it in the drawer that shouldn't have existed. Third cabinet, to the left, just beneath a built-over section of drywall, in what the original blueprint called Therapy Room B. There was no Therapy Room B. The ledgers said room, for it ended at the hall. She opened the drawer anyway. It sighed when it gave. Inside, dust, paper, the faint smell of wax crayons and dried citrus disinfectant. The scent every Statron school used, as if hiding what childhood really smells like. The folder was heavier than it looked. She didn't open it there. She took it back to her motel. Not because it felt wrong, but because it felt seen. She pulled the blinds halfway down, enough to see her reflection in the window, enough to watch the light leak over her shoulder. The sun was wrong here, slow, syrup-colored, like it had to drag itself across the sky. The folder opened stiffly. The first page was redacted, black box over every line but the child's name. Noah C. age 7, referred for drawing concerns. Underneath a sketch, simple, crayon, unsteady lines, but the colors were wrong. Trees in blood red, a church with no doors, a face with no pupils. Next page, another drawing, children at a table. One had no mouth, another had too many teeth. A note, in the margin, not typed. Noah says, "These are real people," said one of them hums when it eats. Claire traced her finger along the edge of the paper. A smudge, not ink, wax. Red dot. The next page was a mirror sketch, not metaphorical, literal, a child's drawing of a mirror, labeled Backwards Me. The date beside it read 2002, but the paper itself had received 2004. Stamped in blue dot, Claire paused in the sketch's reflection. The child's eyes were dark, and the room behind him was warped, like someone had drawn it while remembering. A nightmare. The walls curved. One side had tally marks scratched into it. Underneath, in a lighter crayon, "Don't look when it moves." She flipped the page. A drawing of a hymn, not words. Just lines of symbols mimicking staves. Each note replaced with a different color. Red, red, black, red dot. Each red mark dripped slightly, as if the child pressed too hard, or something bled through. Another page, a shoe by itself, tied too tight. The tongue stuck out like it had been trying to speak in the corner. A sketch of a face, smiling, wide, too wide, and labeled in Noah's handwriting, Miss Mirror Mouth. Claire's chest tightened. She remembered that phrase, scrawled on the wall behind the locker in Chapter House 3, the graffiti they power washed off in 2006. She turned another page. The drawing style shifted. It was rushed, heavy. 3 figures stood beneath a tree, all tall, all faceless. Their limbs bent strangely, too long, jointless. Behind them, a spiral, around it. Smaller figures, seated, hands in laps. Each one had no eyes. Underneath, Noah had written, "Not teachers." Claire stood. She paced. Something pressed against her spine. A memory or a shape. She couldn't tell. She checked the motel door. Still locked. The bathroom mirror was fogged. She hadn't used the shower. She turned back to the folder. The next page was brittle. Folded 3 times. She opened it carefully. Another sketch. This time, a red backpack. Drawn carefully, almost reverently. Beside it, a hand. The hand had no fingers, just an outline. As if Noah hadn't wanted to draw what he really saw. She looked closer. The fingernails were on the wrong side. Beneath the image, a new name, not Noah's handwriting, typed from a counselor's note. Subject's drawing patterns have escalated. Repeating themes, spirals, blood trees, distorted caregivers. Recommending reassignment to quiet dorm, S. Redgrave. School psychological monitor Claire stared at the name Redgrave, the same surname on the donor plaque outside the new children's wing, the one built after the fire. The fire no one investigated. She turned the next page, just handwriting, small, cramped, slanted right, like someone writing while hiding. He said he showed them, but they didn't see it. They said the trees don't bleed. They said the face in the mirror was just a dream. They said I lied about the humming. I didn't. The sandwich stayed warm. The holes moved. The drawer wasn't always there. And I saw the picture before it happened. Claire's hand trembled. She reached into her case, pulled out the burnt photo again. It matched the sketch beneath the paragraph, down to the branch shadows. The boy wasn't smiling in the sketch. He was pointing to something off the frame. Claire closed the folder and froze on the motel mirror. In the condensation that hadn't come from steam, a handprint appeared, child-sized, then another, and then the word, listen. She turned back to the folder. One last page, a full sheet. Clean lines. Noah again. Holding hands with 3 faceless figures, they stood beneath a tree that wept. The figures had no mouths, but above them 3 speech bubbles. Each read the same thing. You said you'd come back. Claire's throat closed as she read the caption, shakily scrawled in red beneath the image. This is the last one I drew before the drawer stopped opening. She turned back to the mirror. The handprints were gone, but in the corner, barely visible, a fingerprint in red wax, smudged, as if someone had pressed it from the inside. The cassette arrived in a manila envelope that wasn't postmarked. No sender. No return address. Just her name on the front. Not Claire. Not the name she used for research, but her legal birth name. The one sealed in foster records. The one they never spoke aloud inside. 1 Maxell, you are 60 tape. No label, no case. She held it up to the light. Someone had drawn on the exposed side with red crayon, a spiral, imperfect, jagged, like it was done fast, or while the drawer was closing. Her recorder wasn't digital. She didn't trust digital. Too easy to lose what wasn't supposed to be found. She slid the tape in. It clicked like a tooth setting into a wound. She didn't press. play, not yet. She turned out all the lights in the motel room, except the lamp by the desk, the one with the hairline crack through its base. The glow was warm, uneven. It reminded her of Sunday school rooms, where warmth was always artificial. The recorder breathed static. Then the tape began, crackling first. That kind of dry click that old cassettes make when they've been played too many times or not enough. Then the hum of fluorescent lights. Then footsteps, soft, shuffling. A voice, not a child's. "Okay, friends, rec time." Claire froze. The tone was sweet, meant to be soothing. Institutional sweetness. Performed, practiced, but it was off, too slow. The words spaced like they didn't belong to the speaker, like they'd been taught. Or stitched. The tape continued. There were other sounds now, the echo of children moving, chairs scraping, paper rustling. A hymn in the distance, sung flat, half-hearted, out of sync. Claire leaned closer. The tape dragged slightly, warping mid-sentence. "You can draw what you feel. Use your colors. Stay inside the lines. The bad things can't get in if you stay inside the lines." That wasn't policy. That wasn't anything she'd read in the staff handbook or the archived procedural guides from 1998 to 2000. And then a pause. Breathing, and in a different voice entirely. Soft, whispery, like it belonged under the floorboards. "Noah." Claire's spine, TENSED. The voice didn't call out. It didn't summon. It addressed. Like it was already next to him. "Noah, why don't you show me what's in the mirror today?" The tape winced slightly. An audio pitch shift she recognized from corrupted footage. The original speaker returned. Louder, firmer now. "No mirrors during rec time, please." Claire stopped the tape. Her heart felt thin. She played. Again, same thing. She scrolled ahead by hand. Near the end of the tape, a rhythmic tapping emerged. 1, 2, pause. 1. Like fingernails on a metal desk. She adjusted the volume. And suddenly, a voice, faint but sharp, right into the recorder mic. "They said I could talk here. They said no one listens outside. So I put it in the hum." Claire's mouth dried. The hum had been mentioned in 3 separate documents. One from a child. One from a janitor. One redacted completely except for the phrase, "The hum seems independent of the HVAC system." She let the tape run. The sound returned. A dragging noise, like furniture across old tile. Then a hymn, whispered, not sung. The melody fractured, the words reversed. She caught one line, intelligible but slurred. "Lead me not into thee." The rest collapsed into static. She stopped it again, opened her laptop, launched the audio analysis software she wasn't supposed to have, ran the playback spectrogram. 2 vocal signatures appeared. One was clearly a child. The frequency range matched known samples from boys aged 6 to 9, whispery, higher pitch. The second, deeper, not adult, exactly, but not human in the usual registers. No vibrato, no breath beneath the words. It didn't overlap. It echoed, delayed, repeating the child's speech with altered cadence, almost. Correcting it, the waveforms never matched. Claire pressed pause. She took out the tape on impulse. She flipped it over. The B-side was labeled, not with a sticker, but etched directly into the plastic shell. Tiny scratches. Shaky hand, it read, "Inside voice, not staff." She replaced the tape, pressed play. The hiss was immediate, cold, sharp, then I'm not supposed to have this drawer. The voice was Noah's. She recognized it from the counselor's file. There was a brittleness to the way he spoke. A child trying to keep his lips still while still getting the words out. They told me not to draw it anymore, that it makes people look something metallic slammed in the background, distant, like a tray being dropped in a hallway. Then they said the walls don't move, but the spiral only works when I'm quiet. I made it too loud last time. Claire leaned in. Another voice whispered, so close to the mic it crackled with breath. Tell her. She rewound it. Played again, slowed it. Tell her. Then, a shift in noise, like a hand passing in front of the recorder. And the final line, whispered not by the child, you're already listening. The tape clicked off. Claire didn't move. She looked down at the table. The burnt photo, the one she kept folded in her notebook, was no longer folded. It lay. Open. The date at the bottom had changed. Not overwritten, changed. Instead of July 1999, it now read October 2001. She stared at it. Her own signature from the intake form was printed on the back, but she didn't work therein. 2001, she never entered the institution. She'd only investigated the ruins, and yet the child in the photo, Daniel, was holding her hand. Claire touched the recorder. It was warm. She ran the spectrogram one last time. 2 voices, 1 child. The second waveform blinked again. It was whispering something, on loop, not words, just a breath, just one sound. Her name. The yearbook arrived in a box that hadn't been sealed, only folded closed, the way things are packed when someone's in a hurry or trying not to draw attention. The paper smelled like dust and glue and faint antiseptic. Not old glue, not archival. Something newer, something wet behind its binding. Claire opened it on the motel bed, where the sheets stayed tucked too tight, as if even the furniture didn't want her to dig. It was the 1999 edition, St. Vincent's Orphan Education Center. That name didn't appear on any state record. It had been dissolved quietly, absorbed into a municipal ledger under Youth Rehabilitation, Annex B. The first pages were intact. Students in rows, faces forced into expression. Identical uniforms. The same brown backdrop behind every child, but in some of the photos, the backdrop buckled, like it was cloth draped over a wall that didn't want to be seen. Claire flipped through slowly. Each page felt like a lie that it agreed to keep, pretending, until she reached page 63. It wasn't missing, it was sealed, glued along the inner seam. Flush with the binding, unnaturally so, as if someone had resealed the book after printing. The surrounding pages were smooth, age-yellowed, but page 63 bowed slightly, like a breath held in too long. She ran her nail along the edge. Glue residue, pressed up, tacky and fresh. She didn't tear it, not yet. Instead, she turned the book on its side. The cover shifted, and there, barely visible against the inside flap, a name had been scratched. Not written, scratched. Noah C., but it was reversed, like it had been carved from the other side of the cover. She held it to the mirror above the motel sink. The name. Read clean. She flipped the book back open. Light from the cracked bathroom door sliced across the page like a scalpel. Page 63 waited, sealed and wrong. She pressed her thumb to the glue dot. Warm. Not like human warmth. Something else. Processed. Artificial dot. Like the heat from an overhead. Projector left running too long. Claire slid the edge of her motel room key between the pages. The glue didn't resist. It seeped the pages, peeled apart with a noise. She didn't. have a name for halfway between paper and breath. Inside, no photos, just white space, empty frames where faces should have been. 10 blank rectangles. Below each, a name. Every name blacked out by hand. Not marker crayon, the red kind again. Same pressure, same jaggedness. Like a child covering something they weren't allowed to draw. But one name wasn't redacted. It was missing, just a space. A perfect rectangle where a name had once been typed, now lifted clean from the page. Only the indent remained. Beneath that blank, a hand-drawn symbol, a spiral. This one thin, precise, and next to it, a date. 6/6/99. Claire's chest ached. That was the date of the unacknowledged fire, the one that wasn't listed in any fire. Department call log, but appeared briefly in a deleted weather report, cited as a heat anomaly. She kept turning pages. One more was glued, page 66. This one wasn't fully sealed, just the top corner. The glue had cracked in the motel's humidity. She lifted it gently. A mirror had been pressed into the gutter. Not glass, just reflective. Foil stock. Thin, cheap, but enough to catch her eye. She stared in the reflection. Not her motel. Not her face. A corridor tiled. Institutional beige. And in the background, down the hall, barely visible, a row of lockers. One hung open. A single shoe sat beneath it. Child's size. Laces undone. She blinked. The reflection returned to normal, her face, her room. She slammed the book shut. It made a soft hump, and a sound beneath the bed answered. A drawer, but the motel room had no drawers. She leaned over the mattress, listened, silence. Then a faint scraping, like a finger trailing. The underside of wood. She stood slowly. On the desk, the yearbook had shifted. Open again. To page 63. This time, the names weren't blank. They weren't readable either. Under a blacklight, one she'd kept since chapter 3, the ink returned, not printed, not penned, burnt, heat-written into the page. 11 names, each followed by the same note in smaller script, withdrawn, see archive 5, C. Claire recognized only one name, her own, misspelled, but close enough. She stepped back. The drawer under the bed creaked open an inch. She crouched, pulled it out. Inside, a burnt photo. This one different, not of Daniel, of her younger, standing beside a door that didn't exist anymore, smiling, holding a clipboard. The date stamped at the bottom read. May 1999. She hadn't stepped foot in the facility until 2002. The page in the yearbook fluttered. A breeze moved through the closed room. Claire turned the book one last time. The inside back cover was cracked, slightly like something had once been sealed into it. She peeled it open with shaking fingers. Inside, a hymn fragment, taped into the cover with hospital tape. Just 5 words, handwritten. The song never stopped here. She folded the book shut. The mirror above the sink fogged. She hadn't turned the water on. A handprint appeared in the condensation, small at the same angle as the redacted names, and then her name, misspelled again, scratched below it in reverse. Claire found the key inside the hymn book, not tucked between pages, but sewn into the spine behind a cloth panel that looked original until touched. The stitching gave like dried skin. Beneath it, a brass key on a chain, worn to a dull silver where fingers had once gripped it tightly. It was colder than the room allowed. There was no tag, just one word, scratched into the base. Silence, not engraved, scratched, like someone had written it in haste, or with fear, or with the wrong hand. The hymn it hid behind was torn, verse missing, all that remained, and when their mouths are stitched, the door shall hold. Claire didn't remember seeing the book in the nurse's office the first time. The drawers had been empty, the wall cabinet locked, the file marked closure prep, had no mention of him, but the book had been waiting in the bottom drawer, where she'd already looked. A drawer that hadn't existed. Yesterday she held the key and stared at the cabinet. Mirror, it reflected a different time. The sink behind her was porcelain in the glass, the old kind, rounded, cracked along the rim, but in the room it was steel, industrial, replaced after the last inspection. She raised her hand. The mirror raised hers. 2 seconds too late, she turned the mirror around. The backing was blistered in one corner. A date had burned through, 7.6.01, a year. After the orphanage had shut down, according to the public record. The key dragged against her jacket as she walked. It weighed more than its size. It pulled toward something, a low kind of gravity. The stairs to the basement weren't on the blueprint, but every child Claire had interviewed spoke of them. Not the older ones, just the young, the ones who aged out early or were relocated before memory turned rigid. They called it the nurses downstairs. They said it, HUMMED, said the songs never stopped down there, said it didn't have air, only echo. The hallway beyond the kitchen still held its breath from the last visit. The tiles sloped slightly downward, a trick of construction or something. Worse, Claire passed the red wax mark she'd left at the corner. It hadn't smeared, it had deepened, almost carved now. She reached the steel door at the end. No signage, no handle, just a narrow keyhole in the center, brass-lined, slightly scorched around the edges. Above it, a child's handprint, blackened, burnt into the paint, too small to be hers, too clear to be an accident. Claire touched the key to the lock. The air shifted. Behind the door, something moved. Not a creature. Not footsteps, but temperature, like the hallway had exhaled. The key turned once, then clicked. A silence followed that sounded like the pause before a choir begins. The door opened inward. No stairs, just a ramp, slight, sloped, covered in old linoleum. Tile, warped and peeling like skin. The walls narrowed, not visibly, but by feeling. The deeper she walked, the tighter it pressed. Her breath fogged, but the air wasn't cold. No vents, no drafts, just moisture. Memory dashed thick. A mirror hung on. The left wall cracked into 8 perfect segments. Her reflection was split, her face a puzzle she no longer recognized. One shard showed her younger, one older, one blinked when she didn't. She didn't look again. The hallway ended in another door, this one wooden, white paint, flaked it. The corners, carved into the top center, a number .5B, the same dorm Noah mentioned in the drawings, the one that didn't appear in any intake roster. Claire pressed her palm to it. The wood was warm. A low hum trembled behind it. Not mechanical, musical, soft. A child's choir. No melody she recognized. Notes looped, doubled back, like the singers. Forgot the words, but not the tune. The sound didn't fade. It deepened, like it was being pulled from the wrong side of a throat. She opened the door. Inside, darkness, lit only by a single bulb swaying from a frayed cord. A drawer stood in the center of the room, freestanding, no table, no desk, just the drawer. The same kind from the tree, from the floorboard, from the room with no window. Claire stepped closer. It opened by itself. Inside, another hymn page, torn, folded once. Smelling of milk and dust, she unfolded it. And if they ask, say they were moved. If they cry, say they were found. If they come back, say nothing. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned, no one, but the mirror on the back wall fogged. A small handprint appeared, then another dot, then her own name, misspelled, reversed dot. Just like in the yearbook, Claire backed away from the drawer. The bulb above her stilled. The music didn't stop, it grew, layered now. More voices, all children, and one voice beneath them all. Lower, not older, emptier. It sang the words in reverse. Claire stepped to the wall. There, beside the mirror, a photo taped crookedly. Corners browned with age. Daniel, smiling, beside. A nurse in a white uniform. But the nurse's face had been burnt out. Not erased, burnt. Claire looked closer, behind Daniel, reflected faintly in the mirror on the wall. Her dodging from the hallway. But the photo was dated. June 1999, 3 years before her first recorded visit. The lock on the door clicked again behind her, and the music shifted. Key, not louder, just closer. The transcript wasn't in the archive. Claire found it in a padded manila envelope wedged behind the filing cabinet, where rust from the radiator had long since eaten into the wall. The corner had fused to paint. She had to tear it loose. The envelope bore no date, no header, just a piece of gauze tape across the front, and the word listen handwritten in pencil, faint, erased once, rewritten again. Inside, 6 yellowing pages, typed on a manual machine. Unaligned margins, misspelled words corrected by hand, and pressed between 2 of the pages, a child's drawing. Folded into quarters, she didn't open that part first. She read, therapeutic, session interviewer, redacted subject, referred as her date, undated location, room 3, West Wing. There was no West Wing, not anymore. That section had collapsed during the restructuring in 2001. Or that was what the incident report claimed. The transcript began in mid-sentence. She said her reflection talks too slow. Q. What does your reflection say? A. She doesn't say things. She remembers them wrong. Q. Wrong how? A. She wears my socks backwards. She blinks between words. Claire stared at the page. The sentence structure wasn't a child's. It was older, coached, like someone had explained what remembering wrong felt like, and the girl had simply repeated the phrasing. The next line was scribbled in pen by the interviewer. Subject refuses. To use I refers to herself in third person. Possible dissociation. Claire flipped to the second page. The interview continued. Q. What do you see when you look in the mirror? A. Not her. Q. Is it someone else? A. No, it's... After the loud thought, Claire slowed her breath. Q. What's a loud thought? A. The kind that makes the glass hurt. The word hurt was underlined twice by the interviewer. Q. Can you draw it? No answer. Then a note. Subject begins drawing. Scratches too hard. Breaks crayon. Claire unfolded the paper between the pages. The drawing had been done in red wax. Jagged lines, uneven, repeated. The figure showed a small girl facing a mirror. Her reflection had its mouth sewn shut, jagged black lines, across where lips should have been. Above her head, a speech bubble. Inside it, the words "stop," written backward. Claire folded the paper back. Her hands shook that the third page bore a change in formatting. The type was smeared, like the ribbon had run dry. Q. Who told you to stop? A. The nurse with no keys. Q. What nurse? A. She locks doors that aren't real and gives medicine to the reflections so they forget. Claire stood, walked to the mirror above the filing cabinet. It was cracked down the middle, a hairline split that hadn't been there. Yesterday, she stared into her reflection. It blinked with her, and then, just once, without her, she turned back to the transcript. The final page bore no formatting at all. Just a string of short answers, as if the therapist had stopped asking questions and simply recorded what the girl said. She said not to write it down, but I already did. They don't like loud thoughts. That's when they move. They live behind the hum in the drawer no one built. Noah didn't cry. He just turned around. His mouth didn't stay. He said the mirror isn't ours anymore. Then nothing. Then a final line, typed hard into the page. Interview terminated at 12:47 p.m. Tape malfunctioned. No audio recorded. Claire checked the date on the page corner. None, but the folder it had been stuffed behind was labeled staff file. H. Keller, Therapy Division. Helen. Keller had been marked deceased in the 2000 personnel log, burned in the east. Wing fire, the one they called a weather-induced malfunction. Claire turned back to the cabinet. It wasn't flush against the wall anymore. A thin gap had formed behind it. She braced her foot, pulled, it shifted, and behind it, tucked into the space where wall met floor, a shard of mirror, not broken. Cut dot almost oval, about the size of a child's palm. She picked it up. Her breath fogged it, but she wasn't breathing that hard. The condensation came from inside the glass, and there, along the edge, etched in what looked too dark, too dried to be ink. Noah Claire's fingers closed. She flipped the shard, pressed it to the cabinet door. It matched, a perfect sliver, clean-edged cut from the mirror above, but the reflection didn't align in the cabinet's mirror. Her face in the shard, the therapy room, dimly lit, a girl seated on the floor, drawing. The crayon scratched harder. Now dot, the mouth sewn tighter. The reflection in the mirror behind her blinked first, then smiled. Claire stepped back, and in the reflection of the shard for just 1 second, she saw herself, but older or younger, watching from behind the girl. The door to the basement was never marked. It wasn't supposed to exist. No one in the staff room had mentioned it. Not when Claire asked about unused floors, not when she showed them the maps that didn't match. The blueprint for St. Vincent's Orphanage had been revised after the fire, sections redacted, but the whispers never stopped. Not in the hallways, not in the children's voices. They talked about the basement as if it was something alive. Don't go there, one of the survivors had whispered to her in passing. His eyes widened, and then he laughed nervously. Not unless you need to. The door was unlocked, though it always had been. Waiting, she opened it. The stairs descended sharply into darkness, the walls slick with the kind of mold that clings. 2 forgotten corners. The musty air hit her like a wall of mildew and wet wood. She hadn't expected it to smell like this, not with how everything else had been scrubbed, sterilized, but this place. It had been untouched for years. The stairs creaked beneath her weight, each step echoing in the quiet like a whisper trapped in a hallway. At the bottom, the room stretched out before her. The walls were bare, stripped of any real purpose. just concrete and paint peeling in long, deliberate lines. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows over rows of cots stacked against the walls. The room smelled like mildew and wax. Unlit candles sat on a metal tray by the door. The shadows danced slowly with each flicker, like the ghosts of children who hadn't yet moved on. The place had been abandoned, and yet there was a warmth to it. An unsettling warmth. The cots were covered in white sheets, all perfectly folded, the edges sharp and pressed as though waiting for someone to lie down, to rest, to remain. One cot had a name tag on it. Noah, do not wake. It was handwritten in faded ink. No official stamp, just a note. It made no sense. The tag seemed out of place, too small for the room. Too personal. Claire knelt down, her fingers brushing the edge of the cot. Her breath misted in the cold air, but the warmth from the room settled deep into her chest. The fog didn't leave through the vents. It swirled beneath her feet, curling like a living thing, thickening as if it wanted to fill the room completely. Her foot disturbed the floor, and the fog lifted briefly, but only to curl back. No noise, no breeze, just the sound of her breath, the soft drip of water from somewhere hidden. The tag on Noah's cot seemed to tug at her thoughts. Do not wake. What did that mean? She had seen the name before, in her files, buried beneath so much redacted information. She stood slowly, moving, to the other side of the room. The walls seemed to close in around her. At the far corner, an old desk sat under a cracked mirror. The glass was warped, the silver backing peeled away in places. She didn't look at it immediately. Instead, her eyes caught on a pile of papers, yellowed and curling at the edges. She reached for them, her fingers hesitating just before she touched the top sheet. A sudden sound came from behind her. The floor creaked. She whipped around. Nothing. The fog thickened, swirling up from the cracks in the floorboards. It moved like a current, silent but persistent. The air felt too still now, too cold. It felt like something was waiting, something was watching. She moved towards the desk, every step muffled by the thick fog that still clung to the ground. The papers on the desk were strewn haphazardly, some torn, others folded tightly, as if they had been shoved in too quickly. There were no files or official records, just drawings. Claire's stomach twisted. She bent down, picking up the first drawing. A child's crayon sketch. It was simple, jagged, hurried of a child, their face covered in shadow. But there was something else. A hand, a child's hand, but too big, the fingers long and twisted. And in the corner, an image of a door that didn't exist. And beneath the drawing, written in a child's hand, "They don't like loud thoughts." Claire froze. Her hand gripped the paper too tightly, crumpling it. She blinked, staring. At the drawing, she could hear the faint echo of her breath in the fog. Suddenly, there was a sound, a shuffle, a faint scraping from behind the desk. She moved quickly, her heart pounding. There, wedged behind the desk, a shard of mirror. It wasn't just a shard. It was part of the mirror above Noah's cot, the same one, but this piece had been broken. Out of the frame, jagged edges catching the light from the single bulb above Dot. Claire turned it over in her hand. Her reflection stared back at her, but it wasn't quite her. The face in the shard was too pale, the eyes too wide. The room behind her was distorted, the fog in the reflection swirling like smoke, and there, etched into the edge of the mirror, was a name Noah, written in what looked like dried blood. A child's name. The key turned in the lock behind her. The door opened, Claire turned, but no one was there. The fog thickened, rolling over the ground, rising in slow waves, like the room was breathing. She turned back to the desk. The mirror shard in her hand shook as she dropped it. The sound it made was low, almost imperceptible, the fog consuming it as it fell. Claire felt the room shift. The walls seemed to grow heavier, closer. The silence stretched, and then the light flickered. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something. A figure standing in the corner, watching her, a child. The air stilled, and then the music started. Soft at first, the hum of something ancient, too distant to place. The kind of lullaby sung too slowly, like the notes themselves had forgotten their own words. It came from behind the wall. The fog twisted tighter. The sound became clearer. A child's voice, soft, barely a whisper. "Do not wake." Her breath caught. The door clicked shut, and the fog rolled in completely. The backpack had been heavy for its size, too heavy for a child's bag, too weighted for the few notebooks and broken crayons inside. When Claire opened it, the first thing she noticed wasn't the rusted scissors or the mildewed paper. It was the photograph. It wasn't a picture she had expected to find, but one she recognized immediately. A familiar forest path, blurred from age. A child in the middle, staring out of frame. The same child, the same woods. She turned it over. Nothing, no name, no date. Just a rough corner, bent from too many hands, pressed into the dirt so often it had become part of the landscape. The face was too familiar to be unimportant. Noah, she thought. It had to be Noah. The backpack was his. She had already seen the name in the files scribbled quickly, scratched away like a secret no one wanted to remember. But this was different. This wasn't just a lost photo. This was an image of something waiting to be found, waiting to be remembered. The child stood in the same spot where she had seen him before, under a tree where the light broke through like daggers. But now, something was wrong. He wasn't standing still. He was reaching, not toward the camera, but toward something just outside the frame. The background, though, was what made her pulse race. The path was the same, yes, but now there was something else. Just out of focus, a shadow, tall and thin, hovering behind the child, and, in that moment, Claire realized someone else had taken the photo, a figure, just behind the child. She dropped the photo. Her hand shook as she turned the backpack inside out. She needed more than the torn fabric, more than the child's old shoe she found stuffed in the side pocket. She needed answers, but the answers were so tangled up in the things that shouldn't exist that she didn't know where to begin. She pulled out the last item, a small, cracked mirror. Nothing remarkable about it, except for the corner. The scratch on the glass. It had been pressed into something, left behind on purpose. It had been used. She held it up, looking at her reflection first. Not much different than usual, too tired, too wary, like someone who had stared at too many empty rooms, too many closed doors. Then she turned it, catching the light from the window. The reflection moved. Not her. Not at first. It was quick. A flash in the corner, almost imperceptible. Then she saw it, a mouth too wide. The same child, again, but this time his face stretched. Not smiling, not in the way a child would smile. The mouth opened and closed, soundless, in the same pattern of a word she couldn't hear. His arms stretched out, reaching towards something out of the frame, just like the photo. And behind him, behind the child, something else, something tall, its body long and thin, a silhouette that stretched unnaturally high toward the trees. It hovered just behind, hidden by the reflection's haze. But the most disturbing thing wasn't the shape, nor the reach of the child's arm. It was the teeth. The flash of white in the shadow, too high near the branches. Multiple sets, like an insect's mandibles or a creature with too many mouths. One pair too high, another pair closer to the ground, and a third nearer to the figure's head. She turned the mirror around. The reflection disappeared. The room went silent. Claire's fingers trembled as she placed the mirror on the desk. The fog from the hallway crept under the door, curling like smoke around the edges. She could hear something now, a hum, low and persistent, coming from behind the walls. It was muffled, almost like it was trying to stay hidden. She stood, not knowing exactly why, and walked to the filing cabinet that sat by the window. She hadn't planned to search it, not yet, but she felt it, the pull of something forgotten, something buried. When she pulled the drawer open, it slid without resistance. But the sound it made was wrong, hollow, empty, like a drawer that should never have opened. Inside, there were papers, official-looking, bound with fraying string. Not files from the children's intake. Not those records. No, these were different. She reached for one, and it crumbled at her touch. The edges were burnt, blackened, but the words still legible. She held it closer. The child's reflection is the last to leave. It's already begun to walk. The letter had no signature, but the letterhead was from the same institution, St. Vincent's. Claire's throat closed. She had read that name 1,000 times, but here, in the darkness, the words meant something else, something darker. The fog in the room swirled again, thicker now, the air dense and suffocating. She turned back to the desk, her head spinning. Her thoughts tangled. She couldn't focus. She couldn't. The photo, the one she had dropped. It wasn't on the floor anymore. It was on the desk, back in front of her, placed delicately, as though someone had set it there while she wasn't looking. Her pulse quickened. She bent down to pick it up again. This time, she noticed something new. The figure in the background of the photo, the shadow, wasn't just tall. It was moving, stretching further in the reflection, nearer to the child. And then another flash in the corner of the lens. A distorted shape, another mouth, wider, stretching further. She looked back at the mirror. For a second, there was nothing. Then the fog condensed. The reflection of the room bent, and in the glass she saw two figures, Noah and something else. Behind him, close. The photo had been taken again. She stared at it, but the figures weren't in focus, not fully. They were blurred, like they were meant to be out of focus. But then, at the edges, she saw it. The figure behind Noah, the one who had been standing just outside the frame. In the first photo, it had moved. Not just moved, it followed, and it was smiling. Claire wasn't supposed to be looking at these files. The file itself was buried beneath. Layers of redacted case reports, flyers from summer camps that never ran, and intake records from children whose names had been marked out entirely. She'd spent days piecing together the history of St. Vincent's Orphanage, using old documents, county records, and whispers from staff who still passed through the area. But she hadn't intended to dig into this particular box. Not this, deep. But it was the name on the top that caught her eye. Keller, H. T.O.H. Helen Keller. The counselor who had left in 1964 after a brief medical leave, never to return. No record of her departure. No follow-up interviews. Nothing. Just a blank space in the files where her name had once been. The box labeled "Counseling Records, Confidential" sat beneath a pile of financial documents, as if it were an afterthought. The tape sealing, it had been disturbed, but the contents were intact. Claire didn't pause. She opened it. Inside, more files than she had room to carry, but she started with the one on top. It was a photocopy, grainy and old, a group photo from a field trip, children and staff standing in front of a tall fence, their faces in shadow, the light too bright above them. But in the back row, a figure stood slightly apart from the rest. The face wasn't fully visible, just a blurred shape, but the posture, the stance, was unmistakable. It was Helen Keller. Claire leaned in. The file was dated 1961, but Keller was supposed to have been long gone by that point, according to the staff records. This photo couldn't exist. She turned the page, heart pounding, feeling the weight of something she couldn't yet understand. There, beneath the photo, was a name. Not the name she was looking for, not Noah, but something even more troubling. The file she was holding was labeled Noah C. Group Photo Analysis. She didn't breathe. She ran her finger down the page. The document was written by Helen Keller herself, with careful annotations along the edges. It was dated June 7th, 1961. The report detailed the child in the front of the photograph, Noah C., who had become withdrawn during the trip and showed signs of isolation. Keller noted that Noah refused to engage with the other children but insisted on spending time alone in the woods. But then Keller's note shifted. Subject's behavior is concerning. He avoids all eye contact. I've seen him talking to himself. He insists that there is someone following him, watching from the trees. He says it is a friend who can't be seen. He is adamant that he is not alone. The ink on the page was thick. Every word was carefully formed, and Claire could almost hear Keller's voice as she read it. Then came the chilling part. I spoke with the nurse today. She confirmed that Noah's behavior is consistent with the symptoms noted by the previous counselor. They are still monitoring the issue. No further action recommended unless behavior escalates. Claire's hands shook, the file slipping slightly from her grip. The photo had been taken that same day. Noah was in the front, as described, but Keller was standing directly behind him, obscured, and behind her, someone else, a shadow. But it wasn't just anyone. The shape of a figure, dark and tall, standing at the edge of the woods, blurred like it had been moving just as the picture was taken. Claire couldn't look away from it. She placed the file aside and reached for the next page, then the next, flipping through case notes and analysis papers until she found another. The photo had been scanned again, and this time the child's name was underlined, Noah C. But what stood out wasn't his name. It was the small note in the margin. Subject's posture suggests non-compliance. Note that Keller's presence in the background of the photo is marked by an unfamiliar figure. An unfamiliar figure. She read it again. The hairs on the back of her neck rose. The figures in the background of the photos. They were never alone. They were never just children. They were always watched. She opened the next file, another photo. Another group shot, and there it was again. Helen Keller, standing too far back, almost out of frame. But Noah was reaching, just like before. His hand stretched toward the blurred figure. His face was impossible to read, but something in the background had changed. The blurred shape wasn't so blurred anymore. It was taller now, more defined. Its eyes weren't visible. but its outline was unmistakable. The figure stood next to Noah, but it was too far for anyone to see clearly. The edges of the photo seemed to warp around it, as if the camera couldn't capture what was truly there. Claire's chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out the last of the pages from the file, a last-minute addition, a photocopy of a medical report, stapled loosely to the back of the file. It wasn't signed. It wasn't even dated. But in the bottom corner, a familiar name stood out. Helen Keller, counseled, witness to unexplained behavior. Her fingers dug into the paper, as if the words could disappear if she didn't hold on tight enough. She had to know more. There was no more paperwork. No more notes. Just the name Helen Keller written in red ink. The exact same shade as the ink used to redacted Noah's name. But one name stood out. One name had been forgotten. She paused. Her phone buzzed in the silence. A text. Case. Closed. You're too close. She didn't respond. Instead, Claire placed the photo back onto the desk. The figures still hauntingly blurred. Then she saw it. In the corner of the photograph, someone was blinking. Behind Noah, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. A face. Her heart stopped. It was Keller, but the face in the photo, the person who wasn't meant to be there, was dead. Died in 1964. She ran the photo through facial recognition software. It wasn't in the archives, but there was one result. A match. A perfect match. The program flashed. Helen Keller deceased, 1964, and yet the face was unmistakable, unchanged. In every group photo, she was watching Noah, and in one, she blinked. Claire stood at the edge of the woods, her feet sinking into the soft earth, the weight of the day pressing down on her chest. She had walked this path countless times, each step taking her deeper into something she could no longer control. The trees here, dark and tangled, seemed to breathe with her, slow, steady, as if they too were waiting for something to break. The backpack was still with her, resting heavy against her side. It hadn't been easy to find. She had to sift through layers of forgotten things, hidden beneath the weight of time and redacted files. But it had found its way to her, just like everything else in this place. Like Noah's name, like the photograph, like the truth she was only now beginning to understand. She pulled the backpack off her shoulder and set it gently on the ground, her fingers trembling as she unzipped it. The air around her was thick with the scent of damp leaves and old wood, a kind of decay that was strangely comforting. But the fog had returned, seeping through the trees, curling around the trunks, obscuring the path ahead. Inside the bag, everything was the same crumpled paper, the same half-used crayons. But there was something different now, something heavier. The second photograph. It had been folded inside the lining, tucked away carefully, as though someone had been waiting for her to find it. Claire pulled it free, her heart thudding as she unfolded the edges. The same woods, the same child, but this time the child's face was different. No longer a still, haunting gaze, but one filled with intention. The boy's arms stretched forward, his fingers reaching out of the frame, towards something or someone just beyond the edge. She couldn't stop looking at it. And then, in the distance, the shadow, a figure that had been there before, just outside the frame, watching, always watching. And yet, there was something else, something new. The figure wasn't just standing now, it was moving. It shape-shifted, like it was trying to step into the light, but it couldn't. It was too far to make out, but it was close enough to know. Someone had taken the photo. Someone was watching Noah. And they weren't just there, they were waiting for him to notice. A voice came from behind her, soft, barely a whisper, like the wind through the leaves. He was never meant to disappear. Claire spun around, but no one was there. The woods were silent again. She shook her head and turned back to the photograph, her hands gripping it too tightly. There was a weight to it, a heaviness she couldn't explain. The fog swirled at her, feet creeping up around the edges of the picture, pulling her back into something she had buried a long time ago. The tree, the one where the backpack had been found. She hadn't noticed it at first, not until the storm had come, not until the tree had been stripped bare, revealing what it had kept hidden. And now, as the fog thickened around her, Claire knew she was close. The roots that twisted beneath the earth were still there, still holding on to something they weren't meant to. The storm had not been an accident. The tree didn't trap the backpack, it kept it safe, protected it, sheltered it. She looked back down at the photograph. She had never seen Noah this close. His hand was outstretched, his eyes wide, staring past her as if he were reaching for someone who wasn't there. But there, in the background, she saw it. A glimpse of a face, a shape too distorted to be real, yet unmistakable in its form. The figure wasn't trying to hide anymore. It wasn't the shadow of a passing tree or the distortion of light. It was something else, something that had been there the whole time. The ground beneath her feet groaned. She stepped back instinctively, feeling the weight of the air shift. The fog thickened, suffocating, and then, in the faint light, she saw it. The handprint on the tree, not like the ones she had seen before. This one was different. It wasn't a child's handprint. It wasn't even a grown person's hand. It was too large, too misshapen. The fingers were stretched, the palm splayed, wide. The skin around it was cracked and charred, as if it had been pressed there by something too heavy to lift. No, it wasn't just a handprint. It was an imprint, something that had been there before, left behind by something that should not have been. Claire swallowed hard. The air was still thick with fog, but now it seemed to pulse, like it was alive. She turned back to the backpack, to the photo she had been holding. The figure in the background was still there, and this time it wasn't just standing behind Noah, it was closer. Her breath caught. It wasn't watching him, it was taking him. A faint creak came from the branches above her. The fog moved, shifting again, but this time it didn't just obscure her view, it pushed inward, squeezing the space between the trees. Pressing against her chest, she was running out of time. Claire dug into the backpack once more. Her fingers fumbled. She wasn't sure why she was searching. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. But there had to be something. A clue, a thread she could follow. Anything to explain this. To understand. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and cold. The recorder, her breath froze. She hadn't seen it before. She pulled it out. The small device heavy in her hand, the buttons worn down, the plastic cracked. She knew what it was. She had seen the old recordings before, the ones that shouldn't exist, the ones that whispered back in time. But this wasn't just any recorder. This one had been used. She clicked the play button, and the static crackled through the small speaker. At first, there was nothing. Just the hiss of white noise, the buzz of something trapped in the speaker. But then, a voice, faint, but unmistakable. "Thank you for coming back." The words sent a chill down her spine. She held the recorder tighter, listening. But there was no more, just static. Nothing, nothing but the sound of the fog.